Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Luke chapter 12, verses 35 through 59. Get dressed for service and keep your lamps burning. Be like people waiting for their master to come back from the wedding celebration, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. Blessed are those slaves whom their master finds alert when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will dress himself to serve, have them take their place at the table, and will come and wait on them. Even if he comes in the second or third watch of the night and finds them alert, blessed are those slaves. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Then Peter said, Lord, are you telling this parable for us or for everyone? The Lord replied, Who then is the faithful and wise manager, whom the master puts in charge of his household servants to give them their allowance of food at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master finds at work when he returns. I tell you the truth, the master will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that slave should say to himself, My master is delayed in returning, and he begins to beat the other slaves, both men and women, and to eat, drink, and get drunk, then the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour when he does not foresee, and will cut him in two, and assign him a place with the unfaithful. That servant who knew his master's will, but did not get ready or do what his master asked, will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know his master's will, and did things worthy of punishment, will receive a light beating. From everyone who has been given much, much will be required, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, even more will be asked. I have come to bring a fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is finished. Do you think I have come to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. For from now on there will be 5 in one household divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. Jesus also said to the crowds, When you see a cloud rising in the west, you say at once, A rainstorm is coming, and it does. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, There will be scorching heat, and there is. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky, but how can you not know how to interpret the present time? And why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? Are you going with your accuser before the magistrate? As you are going with your accuser before the magistrate, make an effort to settle with him on the way, so that he will not drag you before the judge, and the judge hand you over to the officer, and the officer throw you into prison. I tell you, you will never get out of there until you have paid the very last cent. Yeah, various parables here, and also Jesus' admonition for us to be ready, not to think he is slow in coming, and then use the time that we have in a irresponsible, abusive way, but rather to be on our guard, to be ready, and doing the Master's work. And you yourselves be like men who wait for their master. If the followers of Jesus are to not be greedy or worried, they are to put their focus on the return of Jesus. This is something worth putting our lives into. These words of the Savior are closely linked up with the previous warnings, not to be worldly minded, but heavenly minded. Let your waist be girded and your lamps burning. The idea behind this phrase is well expressed in the NIV. Be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning. We are also reminded that your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. One may have an inner willingness to serve God. Your waist is girded, but not have the illumination needed to serve him well, the light of God's word burning brightly. I say to you, he will gird himself and have them sit down to eat, and will come and serve them. The ready servants will be served by their master and blessed. There is rich reward in living a life ready and expectant for Jesus to return. Those servants who are alert to their master's return will be blessed. So blessed are they, in fact, that the Lord will reverse the roles and serve them by girding up his loins and seating them at the table and serving them. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. We all know the embarrassment of being called on when unprepared. Jesus told everyone to be prepared for his coming, which is the most important thing anyone could ever be ready for. A thief never announces his coming. He comes at a time when you would not expect him. The way to be on guard against a thief is to live in constant readiness, and the way to be ready for Jesus' return is to live in constant readiness. Peter said to him, Lord, do you speak this parable only to us or to all people? Jesus answered Peter, saying that he spoke to everyone, that all should be like a faithful and wise steward. In a sense, Jesus said, I speak this parable to all who live their life in readiness, even as a faithful and wise steward. All who are servants of Jesus must be ready for his return, but those who are ministers among his servants must all the more be ready. Ignorance of the divine shall not wholly excuse the sinner. He shall be beaten, but his stripes shall be few. His damnation shall be gentle compared with a minister's that knows his master's will, but does it not, teaches it to others, but does it not himself. God looks upon wicked, loose, and scandalous, and mischievous ministers as the greatest transgressors, and he will deal with them as such. But if that servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, a poor steward lives without the expectation of his master's return, and it shows in several areas of his life. He mistreats the master's other servants. He begins to beat the male and female servants. He is excessively given to the pleasures of this world, to eat and drink. He is given to intoxication and be drunk. Jesus here clearly connected the readiness for his return to a life of love, spiritual focus, and self-control. Likewise, the heart that says, my master is delaying his coming, is connected to this kind of low and fruitless life. Some get weary of waiting for his return, or cynical about the return of Jesus, because it hasn't happened yet. This is exactly the attitude Jesus warned against here. If in the perception of some, Jesus is delaying his coming, it is to rescue more people from the judgment to come upon the world in the very last days. The master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him. Ready or not, one day the master will come. When he comes, he will punish those who were not ready and denied his coming, and will reward the ready. And the bad servant here is never ready. So the Lord will come will necessarily come on a day when he's not expecting him, because he's not expecting him to come back. And that servant who knew his master's will and did not prepare himself or do according to his will shall be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few. When the master comes, he will let the punishment match the offense. Those who knew how to be ready and yet were not, will be punished worse than those who did not know and were not ready. I came to send fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. One might regard this fire in a few possible ways. It may be that the fire Jesus spoke of was judgment to come upon the Jewish people in the following decades. In Jewish thought, fire is almost always the symbol of judgment, so then Jesus regarded the coming of his kingdom as a time of judgment, from Barclay. It may be that the fire Jesus spoke of is the power of the Holy Spirit that could only come after he had accomplished his work on the cross. It may be that the fire Jesus spoke of is the spread of the good news and the coming expansion of the work of his kingdom across the globe, which could not happen until he had accomplished his work on the cross. Or it could be some combination thereof, like the judgment and the spreading of the word being both contributing to people reaping judgment on themselves, or else exoneration, I guess. In that you have the previous verse, which was saying that those who know their master's will and don't do it will have the greater offense than those who don't do it and don't know. So, Jesus' light brings light to us so that we can discern between good and evil. And like the scribes of that day who were building the tombs of the prophets, they were tested by the appearance of the apostles there and committed the same deeds that their forefathers did, bringing a fire of judgment on themselves. How distressed I am till it is accomplished. Jesus was distressed until his work on the cross was accomplished, because he knew all the good that would come of it, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, from Hebrews 12:2. Father will be divided against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother. This may be the price one must pay for being a faithful steward. When you follow Jesus faithfully, there may very well be division for his sake. His coming would inevitably mean division. In point of fact, it did. That was one of the great reasons why the Romans hated Christianity. It tore families in two. You can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, but how is it you do not discern this time? Jesus rebuked the people of his day because they did not discern the time. They should have understood more about the prophecies regarding the first coming of Jesus and appreciate the obvious signs confirming Jesus as the promised Messiah. Yeah, it reminds me of when John was in prison and the disciples of John came to him saying, "Are you the promised one, or should we wait for another?" And Jesus said to them, return and tell them what you see, essentially, that the blind can see, that the lame are healed, that the dead are raised, that good news is being preached. It's like these should be signs pointing to the fact that Jesus is the Messiah. He also said to the multitudes, Jesus spoke this to the multitudes, not only to his disciples. Jesus wanted everyone to discern the time and be ready for his return. Why, even of yourselves, do you not judge what is right? Jesus asked his listeners to think through it for themselves. Anyone who can judge what is right can see the importance and good of getting right with God before we come before him as judged. If one waits until they will stand before his throne of judgment, the time will then be too late. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, regarding this passage, yes, and why even of yourselves do you not judge what is right? When you go with your adversary to the magistrate, make every effort along the way to settle with him, lest he drag you to the judge deliver you to the officer, and the officer throw you into prison. I tell you, you shall not depart from there till you have paid the very last mite. Yeah. We are the criminal in the story. God is the magistrate whom we've wronged. And we should seek to get right with him while we still have time to do so. That is, while we still live. Otherwise, he'll throw us into prison, and I tell you, you shall not depart from there until you have paid the very last mite. By analogy, we can see that in light of the work of Jesus at the cross, God offers a settlement out of court. that is, before the judgment, with God by putting our trusting love in who Jesus is and what he did for us on the cross. You shall not depart from there till you have paid the very last mite. Jesus reminded them, and us, of the great penalty of not settling with God before the day of judgment. All of this presses upon us the urgency to get right with God now, and to live in readiness and anticipation of the return of Jesus. Jesus here alluded to the idea that there is a price to be paid in hell, till you have paid the very last mite. This helps to explain the fearful yet biblical truth that hell is eternal, because payment for sins is required, and imperfect humanity can't make a perfect payment required by a perfect God. The punishment of hell is eternal, just as life is eternal in heaven. The torment of hell is forever, and the fires of hell are not quenched, burning forever. The unjust have their own resurrection, presumably with bodies suited to endure the punishment of hell. Yeah. So, important to get right with God today. Carrying on, Psalm 78, verses 56 through 64. Yet they challenged and defied the sovereign God and did not obey his commands. They were unfaithful and acted as treacherously as their ancestors. They were as unreliable as a malfunctioning bow. They made him angry with their pagan shrines and made him jealous with their idols. God heard and was angry. He completely rejected Israel. He abandoned the sanctuary at Shiloh, the tent where he lived among men. He allowed the symbol of his strong presence to be captured. He gave the symbol of his splendor into the hand of the enemy. He delivered his people over to the sword, and was angry with his chosen nation. Fire consumed their young men, and their virgins remained unmarried. Their priests fell by the sword, but their widows did not weep. Yeah. And I think what's being referred to in 78:61, he allowed the symbol of his strong presence to be captured. He gave the symbol of his splendor into the hand of the enemy, is the Ark of the Covenant being captured at Shiloh in the narrative in 1 Samuel. When the Ark of the Covenant was captured at Shiloh, the daughter-in-law of Eli, the high priest, also learned that her husband, her brother-in-law, her father-in-law, and 30,000 Israeli soldiers were killed. She was pregnant, and the news was so overwhelming that she went into labor and died giving birth. With her last words, she said to name the child born on such a tragic day, Ichabod, meaning the glory has departed. There certainly was a sense in which the glory had departed from Israel, but it wasn't the glory of the Ark of the Covenant. The glory that departed was the glory of God's blessing upon and presence with an obedient Israel. Yeah. And finally, Proverbs chapter 12, verse 24. The diligent person will rule, but the slothful will become a slave. You either master your passions or become mastered. Interesting. This is both according to the blessing of God, who rewards the diligent, and the nature of the world and society. Hardworking people achieve and come to places of leadership. But the lazy man will be put to forced labor. Because he is unfit to rule over others, or even himself, the lazy man will be ruled over by others. The lazy man, Hebrew, the deceitful. So he calls the slothful, because deceit and idleness are commonly companions, and such men seek to gain by fraud what they either cannot or will not get by honest labor. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.